Grigori Rasputin brought down the whole Russian Empire single-handedly. Right? Well, that's not true. Rasputin was a controversial figure, but there is no doubt that the press exaggerated about his role in the events that led to the Russian Revolution. I wonder why. Why was this Siberian peasant so hated despite his insignificant part in how things unfolded? The answer is hidden in the question, because Rasputin was a Siberian peasant. In this video, I'll explain how Grigori Rasputin was and is a victim of racism and xenophobia. In 1869, Grigori Rasputin was born in Pokrovskoye, a small village in Siberia. It's one of the most remote areas in the world, and surviving there was particularly difficult in the 19th century. Grigori had 7 siblings. All died before adulthood. Also, among Grigori's 7 children, 4 passed away. While there is not much information about the first 30 years of Rasputin's life, many rumors hover around him. Some said he had a taste for stealing and crime in general. But there is no evidence that he was particularly bad behaved. At most, he had only one conviction that led to a few days in prison. Rasputin was interested in religion and mysticism. He started his mission when he was 28 and traveled to many places including the Middle East, Greece, and Kazan. He soon became a well-known and trusted monk in the circle of the Orthodox Church and joined the Church of St. Petersburg in 1904. The next year, he met the royal family for the first time. The year after, he had his first encounter with Tsar Nicholas and his family. And, finally, in 1907 he famously managed to heal Alexei Romanov, the son of the Tsar and Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorovna, the German-born Empress of Russia. Since then, he gained their trust, and no one managed to keep him away from Tsar's family for a long time until the date of his assassination. In the next years, many were worried about Rasputin's political influence on the royal family. These worries were further fueled when the First World War erupted. Nicholas frequently traveled to the front to organize the military. So, apparently many decisions in his absence were made by Alexandra, who had no skills in politics. People were concerned that Rasputin could manipulate Tsarina. There were even rumors that they were romantically involved. However, claims regarding the existence of such a relationship and influence are largely unfounded. It's not clear if any decision could be executed only because the Tsarina had said so. Also, it's questionable if Tsarina ever made any decision only because Rasputin had asked so. If you really want to know who was to blame for the situation in Russia, ask yourself who ignorantly brought Russia to a war against Japan in 1904. Whose mismanagement had protesters killed in 1905? Who entered Russia to the First World War? Who left St. Petersburg and left Alexandra in charge? Who signed a decree on the dissolution of the Duma? And who abdicated the throne? The truth is that everyone wanted Rasputin gone, regardless of how good or bad his consults were. Many in the church were jealous of him. Also, some were worried about the rumors that he was a womanizer and had relationship with many women. They planned to murder him in 1914. In an attempt, Rasputin was stabbed several times but survived eventually. Also, a group in the Duma of Russia hoped to eliminate Rasputin because they wanted to isolate Tsar and his family. Most of them hated the royal family and wanted to get rid of them. They thought if the royal family became alone, they would surrender to their requests. This guess eventually turned out to be true. In 1917, Tsar found himself among the generals who urged him to abdicate. Exhausted and disappointed, he delegated the power to his brother, Michael Romanov. The next day though, the Duma members gathered around Michael and convinced him to give up his power to end the Romanov dynasty after 300 years. But it was another group who finally finished off Rasputin. These people were worried about the royal family's picture more than anything else. They couldn't stand the image of the Siberian peasant with the Tsarina and his children and wanted to keep Tsar's records clean off a close relationship with Rasputin. They thought Rasputin's appearance was too exotic. His habits were disgusting. And his popularity among women was the result of sorcery. The sentiment of humiliating Rasputin for his appearance continues even today. Watch a few footages from history videos on YouTube.
At first, the men were shocked by Rasputin's disheveled appearance. He smelled truly awful, and his stare, it was terrifying. He was able to dilate his eyes at will, making them appear to be almost fully black.
Bearing in mind that he was one of the scariest looking individuals to ever have lived, and was famous for never washing and therefore smelled like a badger's arsehole.
Such attitudes just reflect the rumors in Russia during the years of the revolution. Nobody asks why the appearance of Rasputin is the basis for harsh judgments about him. He had rough hands, maybe because he had to work in a farm. He couldn't align with eating and bathing habits of the noble because he wasn't raised by a noble family. In short, he wasn't exotic. He was just different from the St. Petersburg stereotypes. He could be easily distinguished from the noble family. That's why people thought he shouldn't be around them. Humiliating the peasants' looks has no other explanation but racism and xenophobia. People who judge Rasputin based on a photo would also judge others based on their looks. What was the thing in Rasputin's appearance that stimulated his enemies? Astonishingly, Rasputin was similar to the stereotypical portraits of Jews in the anti-Semitic propaganda. This conspiracy that an untidy man with the long beard controls Russia was too much to bear for some people. The basis for hating Rasputin might be the same as the reason for hating Jews in those days. Interestingly, Rasputin was one of the few people in the Empire administration who tried to somehow improve the situation for Jews, which gave people another ground for hating him. On December 30th of 1916, the final plot against Rasputin was carried out. He was invited to the palace of Felix Yusupov, Tsar's niece, who hoped to get rid of Rasputin. But Yusupov was not alone. He had accomplices. The most important accomplice, whose involvement is usually undermined, was Vladimir Purishkevich. Purishkevich was a far-right politician, noted for his monarchist, ultranationalist, anti-Semitic views. He was described as the first fascist and a leader of early Russian fascism. There is no surprise that he hated the Siberian peasant of our story. He had a harsh speech in Duma against Rasputin a few days back. In the speech, he said,
"The Tsar's ministers who have been turned into marionettes whose threads have been taken firmly in hand by Rasputin, and the Empress Alexandra Feodorovna, the evil genius of Russia and the Tsarina, who has remained a German on the Russian throne and alien to the country and its people."
While planning to eliminate Rasputin, he famously said,
"An obscure mujik shall govern Russia no longer."
The term mujik was usually used for referring to serf men. Purishkevich considered Rasputin as having a low social rank and not worthy of being in the same photo frame as the nobles. Based on Felix Yusupov's narrative, Rasputin was given cakes and drinks poisoned with cyanide on the night of the assassination. Rasputin ate and drank the whole night, but surprisingly he didn't die, nor did he seem to be dying. The summary of what came next is that the plotters shot him several times. They thought Rasputin was dead, but he woke up, tried to escape, and even attacked the plotters. They shot him again, but he survived again. They shot him for the third round, and Rasputin finally died. The assassins believed that Rasputin's apparent immorality came from his demonic quality. They were wrong. Their impaired judgment came from their xenophobia. It is questionable whether Yusupov told the true story. But let's assume he did. Let's assume Rasputin was very difficult to kill. Well, it's not surprising. He was born and raised in Siberia. He was the only surviving child of a family. Rasputin was clearly a strong man with a high level of immunity and resistance against death. The noble plotters just evaluated him by their own standards. They thought we would have died if we were shot like that. They were probably too xenophobic to understand that Rasputin was a human being like them, but he was different because he had different upbringing and genetics. Of course, Rasputin was not innocent. Like all of us, he made many mistakes. He may even deserve harsh judgments, but not for his appearance, not because he does not meet the fascist standards of normality.